Inflation showing signs of easing, which is welcome news to consumers. But from what we've seen so far in earnings season, many consumer giants are planning to keep prices high. Joining us now with a recap is Yahoo Finance's Brooke DiPalma. I know one of those companies that we talked about heading into the break was Coca-Cola, but you've got a litany of them. And this is not welcome news for consumers. For the companies, maybe.
Right. But let's hear a little bit more, because we're seeing ultimately what's happening here is these heavy hitter consumer companies like Coca-Cola ultimately raising prices, and consumers finally are putting their foot down, and we're seeing that in volume growth, or lack thereof, rather. So at Coca-Cola, let's take a closer look at pricing. We saw pricing increase 10%, but volume remaining flat. Now, in the call, they did say in developed markets like North America and Europe, they're seeing some willingness among consumers to switch to private labels, which is obviously not good news for them. And so in these particular markets, they said that our pricing is largely in place and is expected to moderate as we cycle pricing initiatives from the prior year. Now, moving right along, we're seeing this similar trend at Procter & Gamble. Their pricing up 7%, volume dropping 1%. And P&G CEO telling Yahoo Finance after posting its quarterly results that this was a, quote, very, very modest decline, which they would expect with the level of pricing that they've been taking. But they did hint at more on the call. He did say that pricing isn't going away in the absolute. It's linked to innovation. So they have a very strong innovation pipeline underway, which will ultimately cost more for consumers. Conagra Brands, that's behind Bird Eyes and Duncan Hine, rather, they took a pretty significant price jump, up 17% year over year. Now, the words that they used was inflation justified. They did see volumes drop as a result of that. And as you can see there, they noted that pricing peaked in Q3 due to their actions to offset that cost of goods. And they're estimating, and as they look out to the end of the year, they're saying a slowing rebounding of volumes as prices start to wrap, but they do expect ultimately to keep up with those higher prices. And Kraft Heinz has decided to hold off to some higher prices. They did see net sales rise 2.6%, but volumes down there as well. And ultimately, the company did say that they are continuing trying to catch up with very high inflation costs, that they are a leader within the category. And so they had to make the decision, and they would do it all over again to raise prices.
Brooke, what are we seeing on the fast food, fast casual restaurants? I'm thinking back to a name like Chipotle, which was one of the first to step up and raise their prices.
Yeah, well, Kiko, we saw them actually miss on same-store sales in their recent earnings report, and they were one of the first to raise prices. And earlier this year, in the springtime, they did say that they were going to hold off. But in the latest earnings report, that was in question among investors, especially on the call. They held up and they sort of defended CEO Brian Nichols, saying that I think we've proven time and time again that the brand is very strong and the value proposition is very strong. And as they get closer to that fourth quarter, we'll make a decision on exactly what we want to do on that pricing front. So investors certainly questioning whether or not that was a right choice to keep pricing in place earlier this year. But we're seeing this across the board. At McDonald's here in the U.S., they benefited from strategic menu prices and positive guest counts they called out. And earlier this week, when we talked to Starbucks CFO, they said that in the Q4, they will lapse those price increases that they took last year, and they'll see a more normalized return of price increases of 1% to 2%. But certainly what we're seeing here is a bit of consumer pushback. We're seeing sort of that make way into same-store sales as well, as we do lapse these price increases that fast food and consumer giants have taken.
Yeah, I'm going to make my coffee at home. Just kidding. Today I had Starbucks, though. Friday treat.